In today's edition of the program What Do We Know About History, we will tackle the topic of the Silk Road. To do it in a more dynamic way, we will answer questions about the main characteristics of the route.
What do you think the Silk Road is?
The Silk Road was a network of trade routes that connected the Eastern Wall and the Western Wall. Specifically, it connected China and the Far East with the Middle East and Europe. It was formally established during the Han Dynasty of China that went from the year 206 before Christ to 220 after Christ. And it was the central source of the economic, cultural, political, and religious interaction between these regions. Maritime routes were an important part of this network, linking east and west by sea, and were used for the trade of spices, thus becoming known as the spice routes. Although in practice the Silk Road has its starting point in the Han Dynasty, as we have said before, one of the main arteries of the Silk Road, the Persian Railroad, was established way back farther, 300 years before the opening of the Silk Road, during the Achaemenid Empire that went from the year 500 to 330 before Christ by the Persian ruler Darius I. This main artery ran from Susa, North Persia, now known as Iran, to the Mediterranean Sea, what we know today as Turkey.
Which are the origins of the Silk Road?
Traditionally, silk production was developed in China and entrusted to Chinese women. It was carefully guarded as the state secret, and revealing how silk was made could be punishable to death. Centuries later, it would develop into a vast trade network denominated and known as the Silk Road. Marco Polo, a merchant that traveled through these routes, mostly ancient Asia, and described them in his famous work The Travels of Marco Polo, a narration that made known in medieval Europe the lands and civilizations of Central Asia and China, but didn't get the credit of naming them. The name of the Silk Road to denominate the concept is a relatively recent term, as before these ancient roads had no name at all. It was in the 19th century, in the year 1877, when a German geologist called Ferdinand von Richthofen named this trade road as Seidenstraße, that means Silk Road, or Seidenstraßes, that is the plural Silk Roads.
Do you know why was the Silk Road used? What were the main objectives and purposes of the Silk Road? As there has always been the need to move from one place to another and to exchange goods or services between places, the Silk Road was created in order to connect routes and make possible the exchange of arts, religion, cultures, ideas, and technology, among many other things. It crossed almost a whole continent and occupied more than 4,000 miles, so it required certain level of development and services to provide the traders with the basic things, such as food, rest, and sleep. Moreover, as it was used by a lot of different people, the purposes were different. It is commonly known to have as a main objective trade, but actually, trade was not the main purpose. It was the exchange of cultures what really changed history and made the legacy of the Silk Road exceptional. Do you know which goods or services were traded on the Silk Road? And do you know if something else was also traded on the routes? Judging by the road's name, silk was the main commodity in the list. It was ideal for trade and long-distance transportation. However, other goods were traded, such as wool, skins, cotton fabric, exotic fruits, animals, etc. But what really marked the difference between the Silk Road and other trade routes that have existed in history was their connectedness it created. Apart from material goods, ideas, religions, science, and infrastructure expanded across the sea and influenced a lot of people, having an impact on the history of Russian people. What do you know about the main routes of the Silk Road? Well, the Silk Road consisted of several routes that can be divided into three main branches: the southern, the central, and the northern. The southern route existed along the northern foot of the Kunlun Mountains, passing Ruoqiang, Kiemo, Hetian, Yacheng, Shache, and reached Kashgar, the last point of the Silk Road in China. Then, this route crossed the snow-covered Pamirs, reached Pakistan and India via Kashmir. It could also reach Europe through Islamabad, Kabul, Mashhad, Baghdad, and Damascus. The central route ran west along the southern foot of Tian Shan Mountains, passing Lulan, Turpan, Korla, Kuche, Aksu, and Kashgar. Afterwards, went over the freezing Pamirs, won to Mashhad via the Fergana Masin, Samarkand, Bukhara, and finally joined the southern route. The northern route went along the northern foot of Tian Shan Mountains, taking merchants westwards to Hami, Urumqi, and Jining, and then reached areas near the Black Sea, the Caspian Sea, and the Mediterranean Sea. There was also a southwestern route and a maritime route. The southwestern route is the Ganges Delta. The Ganges Delta was a major international trading center from much earlier than the Common Era. The maritime route refers to a maritime section of the Silk Road that connects China to Southeast Asia, the Indonesian archipelago, Indian subcontinent, the Arabian Peninsula, all the way to Egypt and finally Europe. Why did the Silk Road come to an end?
Part of the Silk Road still exists, in the form of a paved highway connecting Pakistan and the Uyghur Autonomous Region of Xinjiang, China. The network was used regularly from 113 BCE, when the Han officially opened trade with the West. In 1453 CE, the Ottoman Empire boycotted trade with the West and closed the routes. The closure of the Silk Road initiated the Age of Discovery, which would be defined by European explorers taking to the sea and charting new water routes to replace overland trade. The Age of Discovery would impact cultures around the world as European ships claimed some lands in the name of their god and country and influenced others by introducing Western culture and religion. At the same time, these other nations influenced European culture. The Silk Road, from its opening to its closure, had a huge impact on the development of the world civilization that we know today. And it's very difficult to imagine the modern world without it.
Did the Silk Road make the transmission of religion easier?
The dissemination of religions also played a significant role in the trade of the Silk Road that is worth mentioning. Together with the economic and political exchange between the East and West, religions of the West were introduced into China via the famous route. Buddhism, Zoroastrianism, Manichaeism, Nestorianism, and Islam were a cultural treasure of the ancient West, which were expanded to China during the old times. Zoroastrianism, Manichaeism, and Nestorianism were called the three foreign religions in the Tang dynasty. In the 1st century before Christ, Buddhism was introduced into Yutian, what we know now as Hetian. From there, it quickly spread throughout the vast western regions. Then, from the 7th century AD, Arab Muslims traveled to China by the Silk Road or the Sea Route to spread the religion of Islam. In the Tang dynasty, Guangdong province and Guangzhou province were the strongholds of most Islamic believers. Islam had a profound effect on the spiritual beliefs in China.
As we have seen, there is little knowledge about the Silk Road and the importance that it has had in history, especially in the history of trade. The legacy that the Silk Road has left to us is very important. It brought cultures together and in contact with each other. It has contributed a lot to merchants, culture, and to future trade routes because as merchants had to negotiate successfully, they had to speak the same language. Hence, it has had a pivotal role in linking the West and the East, and marked a before and after in the history of international relations.